It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted weekly from a kitchen bitch in Kingston, Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Lewis, and I am the host of the show. And we're coming out a day, well, 12 hours really, late this morning, because I went to do this little intro on the Tuesday, but had a bowl of delicious food, descended further into terrible broadcast television, decided to lie on the bed, and then woke up 11 hours later. So here we are, fresh after a plate of cornies. Actually, I had ramen for breakfast, homemade ramen soup noodles, bamboo shoots, soft runny egg, sliced pork, shallots or spring onions, as we call them in this hemisphere. And other delicious bits and pieces. Anyway, welcome. My guest this week is a veteran of his said hobby, passion, vocation, craft, lifelong interest. Well, at least as we discover in the podcast, is half his lifelong interest, as he is 46 and has been a practitioner of said activity for 23 of those 46 years, Mr. Brendhan Lovegrove. A whole lot of interesting stuff on the podcast, a lot of different topics as per usual, as happens over an hour, 20 minutes. Really interesting discussing defining offensive, especially as these days, who is aware, I don't know who's aware, who's not, but particularly a lot of American comics have been complaining that they feel they can't perform as they typically would have on university campuses over there these days, as there tends to be what the comedians term an ultra politically correct faction kind of trying to shut them down. And whether this is true or not, I'm not sure. I was just interested in discussing the boundaries of what one can and can't discuss on stage, because to me, stand-up comics is sort of one of our, well, not last bastions, but one of our only bastions, I guess, of really free speech. There's not many places you can get up on stage and just spew forth what is in your head. Now, providing that is not hurting people in any... See, this is... we're getting to where the definition is blurry. I was going to say that. I was thinking, well, you know, sometimes people will get hurt, but often sometimes if the ideas are crafted well and they're from a good place and they make the wider audience reflect on an issue in a way that ends up positive for humanity in general, then I think that's a good thing. So we touch on one particular topic that may be seen as one of the ultimate taboos. I won't give away what that is. You'll find out in the podcast. But it had me walk away wondering, whether if we shut down that topic, do we then shut down jokes about, say, the Holocaust? Do we shut down jokes about grisly murders? Where does it start and where does it stop? I think my evaluation overall was that as long as you don't set out to incite kind of hatred or the destruction in whatever shape, way, or form that would take of a group of people or a person and so on, then perhaps no topic is off limits. Even now, as I riff again on this, I realise it's an interesting topic. Definition of offensive. Just like as I discussed in the podcast, when in the US again, the definition of obscene has been pondered, and I think it's been pondered in courtrooms in regards to most famously pornography. There was a quote in a famous court case over there where someone involved said, I don't know the definition of obscenity, but I know obscenity when I see it. So again, to all these, individual perceptions of based on background, religion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Big topic. Anyway, Brendhan was fun. The comedian I mentioned, the Chinese-born comedian who's made it in the US, I don't quite fish the name out. If you are interested in Googling him, particularly at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, his name's Joe Wong. I listened to a great podcast where I think Maron talked to him. Stand-up comedy, not a big phenomena in China. Joe Wong... breaking down, I guess that, not a barrier, but, a scene that hasn't really existed over there. So I can only assume there's more Chinese stand-up comics now. Most importantly, he's funny. What I also found out in this podcast, which is kind of lovely, is that in around 1998, unbeknownst to me, it was Ewan Gilmore, rest in peace, who told me in a bar in Wellington I had perfect comic timing and should think about becoming a stand-up comic. I have thought about becoming a stand-up. I think I would have been better at it back then, to be honest. I think I communicate far less now. And I suppose you'd get chops if you did it after a while. I should go into an open mic night. Bomb terribly. We also discussed the passing of Ewan, one of our greats. So enjoy the podcast. Politics come up again. Woo! I guess it's on everyone's mind. I don't even know it's a political system and thinking about which politician to vote in and so on. People are just worried about the world around them, and so it's a topic that comes up because it's how we frame it. So I think that's ultimately a good thing. But the left-wing, right-wing comes up again, and as I've sort of said in the past, this faction-based thing, we always this way. We more often than not, seem to bring politics up and just seems to divide us in the political race. Why can't we focus on the human race, not the political race, when we talk about politics? Ooh, that's quite good. That's quite good. That's my line. All right, follow me, Verbal Highs at Twitter. On Twitter, Verbal Highs Podcast on Facebook, verbalhighs@gmail.com if you want to get in touch. I do have an email to reply to. Thank you, that person who wanted to come on the podcast. I will be in touch. Or give a rating rather on iTunes, preferably 5 out of the 1 to 5. I've got 5 ratings so far. If I could get it up to 10, it'd be lovely. Enjoy the show, folks.
This is Dr. Tannen's Verbal Highs.
No, it was really, you've had some phenomenal people on.
You ready?
Yeah, whatever you like.
Is it 25 years?
It's, how old am I? I'm 46. I started at 23 years.
23 years.
Yeah.
So you're exactly halfway through your life now.
Yeah.
You started. Anyway.
I've been a comedian for half my life. That's the first time anyone's put it like that. But
yeah.
you're bang on, yeah.
I'm a statistics guy, a maths guy. Oh, it's not stats, is it? It's percentages. Is that stats?
Oh, God, you're asking the wrong person, but I think it is.
Okay. All right, here we go. My guest today is a 23-year stand-up comedy veteran, which is half his life. Has won a whole slew of comedy-based awards, including Best Male Comedian 9 times.
Yep.
Billy T Award winner from 1998. Starred in 8 seasons of Pulp Television, and is currently performing stand-up weekly, as well as hosting a internet-based TV show called Stirring the Pot, which we'll talk about later, co-starring Cameron Slater, and has a new show called This Mortal Coil, which will be on as part of the International Comedy Festival. Dates?
I'm on May the 16th to the 21st at the Q Theatre in Queen Street.
Okay, we'll do what they call bookending, and at the end we'll get back to you talking about that again. Welcome, Brendhan Lovegrove.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Okay, so I thought 23 years, so 23 years started,
Mm-hmm.
so that's not like leaving school and I'm going straight into stand-up comedy. So as a way of talking both about your career as a stand-up, but also kind of your background and stuff, what were you doing before that, and what sort of led to what's been such a long gig now?
Well, I was at university from the age of about 21, 22. I was doing political science and philosophy. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had a friend base of 2 guys who became Sugar and Spice, some rock and rollers who became Breast Secreting Cake, and then later on Golden Horse. Yeah. So I came from a really creative sort of friend network.
Auckland Uni?
A lot of them are at Auckland Uni, yeah.
No, were you at Auckland Uni?
Uni, yes. Yeah. And I guess what happened was when I was in the flatting with all these guys, they were so creative that it was mayhem. There was substance abuse from the age of, well, as soon as we left school, and we loved living life and partying, but there was always this very creative base that everyone had, and a lot of them have gone on to really good things. But I heard that my friend Jason Hoyt, who's now working with Lee Hart on Hauraki, they're doing, I think, the Drive show. He formed a duo with a guy called Jonathan Bruff, who was one of the vampires out of What We Do in the Shadows. Yeah. But back then, I met John at Sacred Heart, Jason at Duluth. They became very good friends and started a duo called Sugar and Spice. So before they did the first ever open mic night in New Zealand, I was on the second one, but they were on the first. But just to have a warm-up, we went to the Horse and Trap in Mount Eden to watch a show. And the late Kevin Smith was on, Alan Bro, who was very famous at the time, who later was the team captain of Spicks and Specs. He's now Melbourne-based. And Jeremy Corbett, Michelle Corp. They were all on. And
that's a lineup right there.
It was pretty good. Dean Butler was on, I think, maybe even John Bridges. And there was a great lineup, but I just remember that's the first time I'd ever seen any live stand-up. Yeah. Alan Bro in particular just blew my mind because he was standing there with a beer, talking to a microphone. There were about 30 people there. I was laughing at a lot of things, as were the audience, but it was so raw. In my heart, I went, I'm going to do this. So I then went and saw this funny little curly man at the door called Scott Blanks, who now runs the Classic and is basically the godfather of New Zealand comedy. And I said, can I put my name down to do a gig? And his eyes nearly popped out because he didn't know that people actually would want to do it. And he said, yes. Funny enough, we have a gig in a month's time. We're having the first ever Raw Night on.
So it didn't say, like, have you done this before?
No one had done it.
You know?
No one had done it.
No one had done stand-up.
No one had done stand-up. So
what were they doing at the show?
Sorry. I'll tell you about. They were doing stand-up. But they didn't start with any Raw Nights. So the Raw Nights were actually for people who had never done it before, because a lot of these guys were in funny business.
Open mic night.
Yeah. So these guys come out of funny business, out of a couple of other groups that were
so like Ian Harcourt, Willie DeWitt,
those guys. Yeah. And so Facial DBX, John Bridges, those dudes. And look, they were great back then. But the Raw Nights were really interesting because the one that I had, no one knew what they were doing. It was at Kitty O'Brien's. No one knew what they were doing. Everyone was on for the first time. And the audience didn't know what to expect. And together that made it incredibly... the chemistry was fantastic and the nights were fabulous. I don't know, I can't remember if they were any good, but I remember a lot of laughter and people going really well because there was such excitement that you didn't have to be great to go well.
So you say no one knew what they were doing and no one knew what to expect. Pretty much. I'm assuming you mean, and it is a great place to start, no expectations, but I'm assuming you mean in a local context, because surely you grew up watching stand-up and you'd seen the Eddie Murphy specials and...
No, I hadn't seen...
I hadn't seen a lot
of... Well, even back then New Zealand...
No prior...
Not really, no. I mean, there wasn't a lot of... this was before the internet.
Yeah.
So, I think...
I remember those times.
Yeah, absolutely. So there wasn't a lot of options to see stuff. It was just... we got a glimpse of what it might be. They had an idea of what it might be, and collectively they just did it, and now it's become what it's become.
Oh, now I think about it. I did see videotapes and so on growing up, but perhaps
Dave Allen. I saw Dave Allen.
Well, no, you just made me realise perhaps I did think there was more around there because even TV was so limited then. It's like they were playing.
That's right.
Well,
I mean, Billy T. James would be one. Dave Allen would be another from an overseas comic. They had on the
but then even Billy T presented himself as more variety on stage.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And so I was going to ask you about the history of New Zealand stand-up. So those guys were doing it, ex-funny business, John Bridges and so on, but it wasn't really known in the local consciousness as stand-up. It sort of happened around then, or...
Yeah, and it was... we were getting big crowds on these Raw Nights, and they were packed. Kitty O'Brien's upstairs, albeit it was 70 people max. And then they would do a pro night on, I think it was the Wednesday or the Thursday, and then you get your Kevin Smiths and the guys that have been doing it. But very quickly, because there were so few comics, if anyone was even slightly funny, you were on the pro nights. So you went straight from Rookies Night to pro nights, which is unheard of these days. I think the quickest I've ever seen anyone since that go from rookie to pro nights would be Ursula Coulson. I think it took her probably about 5 or 6 gigs, and then bang, she was on Wednesdays and then Thursdays getting paid.
And then on a panel show weekly.
And then on Everything Now, Superstar in Australia.
So 23, has she left here?
No, but she's doing Melbourne at the moment, and doing terrifically well in big rooms, selling out before she even walked on stage. She's going to be, she's a big comic. She's a big name.
Wow. So 23, you go from amateur to pro because there's 4.5 people doing it. Just kidding. I'm sure it's because you were good. But what is a pro comic in terms of the reality of meeting the rent each week and a few pairs of socks and
obviously the majority of comedians in New Zealand have still got a day job.
Yeah. So what was that?
Well, for me, I wasn't in a position where I needed that much money to survive. So I had little odds and ends jobs. I was still going to university, probably still on student loans.
Oh, you were still studying?
Yeah, I was still studying. But then I got out of that probably about a year into stand-up and just went, I'm going to do this full time. University, whilst it was for me, I couldn't find anything that I wanted to do. In hindsight, I probably would have ended up trying to get into law. I could say I was going to be a lawyer, but I probably would have failed. But
I think stand-ups make good criminal defence lawyers. It is a show.
I think so.
After all.
Yeah. So but I was really taken by it early on, and that whole thing of getting laughs, and also before I started comedy, when I was in the lounge with all my friends, I was just trying to crack people up. I was just, people used to get annoyed with me, or they.
You were working bits before you even knew you were working bits.
Totally. And I think I came from a really good place to have been a stand-up, and then very quickly met Tay Radar, and he lived basically with us in that group of quite talented young guys, and then and so I worked a lot with Tay Radar at the beginning, and then we started doing shows at the basement below the Watershed, and then we went to the Watershed, and we did shows together. Then we did Edinburgh, and but Radar and I, especially at the beginning, had a huge connection. And he was
still close?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
And he's a very bright, talented, good guy.
Yeah.
And Ray is a.
And you can take him home to your grandma.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. They won't know a side of him that I know. But but he's very bright, and he's done very well. We've obviously gone our separate ways in terms of professionally, but I've been very much the purist in terms of stand-up, whereas I always knew that with Raids he would find stand-up, he would like to do a lot of different things, which I've actually started doing of late, but he very early on he wanted to make documentaries, wanted to make, be part of television. We were regarded at the time as very alternative, and then quite very soon after we started, so did Ewan Gilmore, the late Ewan Gilmore and Mike King, and they were very different because...
That's true, they're more kind of your everyman comic, yeah.
Well, and also because they were older than us by 7 to 10 years. So when we started stand-up, we just wanted to have a good time, trying to be funny on this new scene that was, but they saw it as a way of making money, having a career. I didn't think that for about 5 to 7 years, not until I went to London. But they were, and the irony is one was a Westie, one was a Māori, but they actually had kind of the same market at the time.
Yeah.
And but they were both extremely important figures in the comedy scene, but they were very serious about it from word go.
Yeah.
But
sounds like you guys had perhaps just in those few years built something where someone could come in, whatever style they are, and actually have. It was probably a fucking insane thought 3 years before that to go, I'm going to do this. I'm going straight in to be professional full time. You got to have some kind of bedrock to get in there.
Well, the interesting thing about the way that Radar and I developed was that because we didn't have anyone in the industry to look at and go, I want to do that or I want to be like that. Well, now you can. You can get young rookies coming in and watching down at the Classic and go, I like that style, I like that type of delivery. And you can see it in young comics. You can see what they're trying to do. You go, well, that's a little bit of that person, that's a little bit of that person. But we didn't have that, and we had no restrictions. So we were learning by doing whatever we wanted to do. And that's a great way to learn.
That's so interesting you say that, because I've even noticed, because we are so spoilt for content now.
Yeah.
I was a real Mitch Hedberg guy for a while.
Same.
Yeah. And this is something no one else picked up on when I was watching it with them. I saw an Aziz Ansari special.
Right.
And he'd got, he was already at a level where I'm watching him on whatever it was. And I'm like, he's biting Mitch Hedberg. You could tell that and then later on in an interview, he was like, you do take on. So you see these people come through and you go, oh, he's a Hicks guy. He's an Ansari guy.
I very early on when I first saw Greg Fleet, everyone thought I was doing Fleetisms.
Oh my God. I got to meet Greg briefly in Australia, and it's actually just physically and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Weird.
He's
that's
insane.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time with Greg, And but when I first saw him, he said things at my mind went, "Oh my God, I didn't realise you could say stuff like that." Okay, so and then
so for everyone, people who don't know listening, because that might be a bit more of an obscure name. So I lived in Melbourne many years. He's a Melbourne-based comedian, but he like yourself, I guess. He's a well-known comedian throughout his country,
and highly respected.
Yeah,
for having been a huge part of alternative comedy, probably in the late 90s. He's been a great comic for a long time, but he's also had his own struggles.
Yes, I know. Yeah,
and but whether or not he's mastered those, I'm not sure. But I've had him over here a few times, and I love his company. I'm a huge fan of Greg, and when he's at his best, he's it's very hard to top.
So the Aussie scene had, I'm guessing, like most things. Again, I think the way things spread now, well, I know, is a lot shorter, obviously, because technology and so on. But I'm guessing back then, that same old story, Aussie would have had a few years on us in terms of a stand-up scene.
They did. They probably had a good,
maybe 80s or late 70s or...
Yeah, I would say probably 20 years on us.
Yeah.
But
true, because you had horrible stuff like Kevin bloody Wilson.
Well, all that stuff's necessary.
Yeah, it is. But I can still... This is my podcast.
Yeah.
And that shit is horrible.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, because even at the time you go, bloody, these guys are...
I thought it was amazing when I was 11.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
When
but it has to, they're funny enough... And Ursula Colson and I were discussing this, but you actually need, for some gigs that you do, a little bit of hack every now and again, or you're just going to be... Some audiences you play need a little bit of, g'day, you follow us, or some Maori stuff, or whatever, and just to immediately associate with something they can laugh to.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually,
and you know what else? Like, I'm not being snobby or whatever. I'm just being facetious for the sake of it. But yeah, that style. So with with Fleet and you just talking about other people in the scene and close relationships formed. I mean, I know that happens in any scene or even any profession or even probably any sport you play, sports clubs and so on. But I have heard some people, stand-ups funnily enough, say that stand-ups are kind of cut from a certain cloth where you often very much feel like kindred spirits. Do you think there's something to that? That there's a camaraderie that goes beyond other...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, funnily enough, and I think I could talk about...
Similar levels of insanity, similar levels of perspective on the world.
Well, look, Jeremy Elwood and I have gone on really badly for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And now we've sorted it out because we just can't even remember what we were griping about in the first place. Probably some competitive issues, some jealousy.
Sounds like you
issues.
took an E right at the end of that.
I think it was just...
Hey, you go, hey man, what were we... Well,
my point...
give me a hug.
I think there's a little bit of that. But I think also because he's a comic, at the end of the day, I dig comics because I know what they're doing and I know what their life involves.
And you know that, yeah.
And it's been a hard-ish grind. It's also one of the, when you call it a career, it actually is, but it's, there's a lot of time in that career that you've got your day to yourself. Yeah.
Hey, but if you were something like an ad creative, you'd be billing that time for $200 an hour because that's thinking time.
That would be
and
great.
You actually are doing that. You are processing, and what's comedy? It's observation. So you got to soak that stuff up.
Yeah.
You were named most offensive comedian in 2006. That sounds like
well, not quite. I won most offensive joke, and I've actually won that 3 times.
Okay, I'm hesitant to ask people
to
tell jokes, especially comedians, on the podcast. But if it wasn't a bit, what was the joke?
Well, I can't remember what the first 2 were, but I know that one that I won last year for most offensive joke was about a doctor in America who had cured some cancer patients, like genuinely cured them, by injecting the herpes virus into the tumour, and the tumour disappeared. So my gag started by going, not even cancer wants herpes. And which is a cool line, I mean, how nasty is herpes when cancer goes get fucked is basically the line. And then I say that, but this is when it gets a bit rough. Then I say that, and I feel I can talk about it because my mum died of cancer 3 years ago, but if I'd known, I could have had sex with her and saved her. But she had bowel cancer as well. Thank God it wasn't in her throat. That would have been awkward. And then I ended by going, it's fine, my mum's still alive. She's not a fan of that particular joke. But if you were to look for it just from a purist level, as a joke, I go premise, and then I go punchline, 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 punchline. And each punchline gets progressively worse until it's nearly unbearable.
I wanted to get to that later. what's offensive, what's not, how's that changed, how do you measure it,
Sure.
why do you have the right to say that is and that isn't, so on and so on.
Well,
What are your rules? But before that, you just
Yeah.
mentioned something else. It sounds like if you started off and there was no established kind of scene or whatever, you could,
Sure.
this great new frontier, you could do what you want. It sounds like as you've gone, you've sort of looked at the craft not only by doing it, but sort of historically and so on. Like, have you sort of, I don't say, is it studied, but has it also been a sort of life of watching all these comedians from overseas
Absolutely.
and checking out material
absolutely.
and knowing who came from
Sure.
where and
Very much, and,
Yeah.
and it's changed a lot, and I've changed a lot. I mean, for anyone who may have gone, I'm not a Brendhan Lovegrove fan, or I hate his material. Well, my show's really different each year. So, I'm evolving. I also realise that there's certain things out there that can upset people. And I'm not out to upset people. I have my own philosophy on that, so I can still upset people because my philosophy is different, or I might talk about things that would trigger some a debate in their mind because they feel differently. But I don't want to offend. And, with that particular gag, it is my mum. It's not their mum. It's clearly not true. So it's just a gag.
But also, you're on a stage entertaining people. I don't
Well, that's
know.
right. And I'm not doing an hour
you
of
must have won that offensive award, like in jest. Like not many
Sure,
people
well, that's
actually
right.
like went.
That's right.
"Oh,
That's right."
I'm so offended and stormed out of the the theatre.
It's hard to explain why that gag is particularly funny anyway, if you just wrote it down, but live on stage, it's actually when you do it, because you're going from just a premise and then a punchline, it's actually quite a well written piece. It's intense, because people don't like hearing that thing about their mums.
Universal theme.
Well, that's right. And but it never happened. Of course, it never happened. It's just a joke. I'm not there. I'm not writing a play. I'm not there for my audience to go, "Oh, he makes a good message." I'm there to make them laugh, and I'm there to do it in a way that perhaps they couldn't, hopefully. And with the best intentions, try and take some risks to go into areas that would just really make them go, "Whoa, I can't believe what I'm listening to," without any desire to offend, to upset. Like there's certain things now that I just wouldn't tackle because I just don't think there's any point.
So a personal question: is your herpes under control? Or?
Well. Let's just say that neither of those things have come into my being, which is good.
You're saying, looking back, you've changed some things, and look, I think anyone with any kind of creative endeavour, if they can't look back like that over 20 years, they'd probably be doing some hack Vegas thing, wouldn't they? Kind of over and over in a loop. But I was going to say, because you definitely very much that idea popped out of your head in relation to offensiveness and so on. Like, have you looked back and gone, I kind of shouldn't have done that? Or is it more of an attitude of like, oh, I did that, I don't see the world that way now, let's move on, no one got hurt?
Sure, I mean, there's
a lot to think about.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's definitely things that I've done and I've said on stage, because it is live.
Yeah.
It's live, and there are some things you absolutely regret, like you do in real life. There's been some times I've said things that I might have been worked up, and I've definitely said some things that I regret. I wouldn't say I've ever written a joke or done material that I necessarily regretted.
Just surviving in the heat of the moment.
There was a couple of things I did in a comedy festival in Wellington from a particular review I got that I've never used again since, because it just upset some people. And
was that this getting the woman on stage and then sending her back and sniffing the seat?
No, that was from a situation where I was actually.
Oh, this is a different show in Wellington.
No, that was it.
Oh, okay.
That was it, and I cut it out of the shaft of that. But it wasn't that. It was actually a routine. This is why things are taken out of context. I was actually doing a routine about dirty old men.
Yeah.
And so under that context, it's completely different. And I'd done that. I had done the same thing on a couple of late shows in Auckland where people were in hysterics because it's so, it's like on a hard, fast and heavy show, but not suitable for 8:30 in a Wellington crowd who've come to watch an hour of stand-up. They didn't like it that night. Fair enough. I chopped it out, and I've never done it since. But a lot of people go, "I love that gag where you do that thing because you're talking about the dirty old men and you do that thing." And that particular gag, but it upset people, and I just didn't do it anymore, and I just didn't think it was a great gag.
Yeah. So it's such a hard. It's the top. We'll get more into. Let's get more into what's offensive and what's not, and so on, and how audiences changes and how that might be frustrating and what's good and bad and so on. But I'm reminded of not offensiveness, but I think it comes up with things like porn and so on. It was someone, you might know this quote. I don't know the definition of obscenity,
right?
But I know it when I see it,
right?
And I think that really speaks to, what's the definition of offensive and who sees it and how do they see it.
Okay, now, if we're talking in real layman terms here, being offended because someone's talking about sex, people have sex all the time and have. It's one of the most dumb things on the human planet. If you can't handle talking about that, I mean, people talk about it in an unfunny way, and in a funny way, it's very funny. It's a little hack, talking about sex. Everyone does it.
And what happens if you can't joke about it? You end up with things like the Catholic Church.
Well, that's right. I think the thing that before we even tackle it with comedy is, you've got to look at how people find offence, regardless of comedy, in society, and remembering that comedy is a place where, if ever it's going to be, a thing that you can do and say things that are clearly meant with the intent of laughter. That's the one place you can do it, and I think people. Well,
you are in one of the most free speech forms on
absolutely, and it should always be like that.
Yeah, totally.
But I think too that just because someone's offended, like I would describe hate speech now as simply with certain people in society as simply having an opposing view, and people hate it. Like they're so intolerant, and I would even go so far as to say that I think people enjoy. They have an obsessive compulsive disorder about finding something that's offensive, and I'll give you an idea that I was born on the 4th of the 4th, 1971, and right through my life I used to see 4-4 on the clock all the time, and I thought I'm going to die at 44, and it became an obsessive compulsive disorder because I was and I saw a doctor about it because it was getting that bad, and he said, Brendan, you're seeing every other number, you're just looking for 44.
Really?
So I got to 45, haven't seen 44 since. Now, my point is that those people are looking for fault. That generation who get really offended are constantly looking for fault.
Yeah.
My generation was defined by what it loved.
Yeah.
There's a certain group out there who are defining themselves by what they hate, and they're looking for it.
Can I just interject there? Looking for fault, or the way I'd maybe angle that is, I agree, but I think also they've been brought up in an environment where, the media sells conflict. Like, you watch the news now and stuff, and stories that used to be reported quite neutral. I don't mean politically neutral here. I mean just neutral. This happened in Warkworth.
Right.
They'll now look for the conflict angle. Yeah. So they're brought up where it's like this bit, reality TV, people yelling at it. So there's conflict. Then the other thing I think that's really changed, and this, especially now that the algorithms on social media only feed you your perspective on things, and stuff that will outrage you because it's not. Yeah. There's that as well. So they're bred it like people will fire up and attack each other online. Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
I think I'd go further than that and say it wasn't just that. It's actually about for them, the oppressive versus the oppressed. Everything has to be that ideology. And I'll give you an example of why, for me, it doesn't work so much, because I think it can backfire. In that, I come from a family who lived in Africa. I have an adopted African family member. My stepmother's Chinese. My two daughters are Eurasian. I've been called a racist, and because of my doing a Chinese accent. And sometimes I'm actually speaking Cantonese. Yeah. And I had one reviewer, the guy who actually reviewed me for the Wellington thing, and he was right in that review. I was off form that night. And,
is this still that same show?
Well, yes, it was that show.
I'm getting to something here. But you need to fucking not do shows in Wellington anymore.
Well, I went back about 2 years later. I actually really enjoy doing shows in Wellington.
Let's do Palmerston and then Picton. Okay,
I'll get onto that. But here's where the philosophy breaks down for me. If you don't let, if I'm going to do like an English accent, you know what I mean? That's an accent, and that's not only that. It's not a well-educated sort of an English fella, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's not racist. Why? Because he's white. Yeah. So I do like a South African one, go down here, but I do a Chinese one or a Maori one, and people are offended by it. If you say to a person, you can do the white ones, but you can't. You're oppressing them. That's comedy apartheid. That is racism by definition. Yeah. Because you're excluding them from an equal playing field. The racism is finding what I'm doing racist, and that really angers me because it's a very simple intellect to just go, I'm triggered by. I'm hearing a Maori accent, and my connotation when I hear a Maori accent is I think it's a very strong, beautiful way to speak. Yeah. Like an English one is, and I've got a good ear for thank Australia, mate. Here you go. I'm good at it. So when I hear someone be triggered by it, I'm like, you have a negative connotation about Maori accent. I don't. Māori, sorry, because I know people get triggered by that. But I don't. I see them as a very powerful, beautiful race. And I like talking about them because they're fantastic, and I always try and celebrate them when I do it. But simply the subject of Māoridom in New Zealand to some people, normally white, offends people. And I'm just stating a fact. But for me, my philosophy is you're excluding them by not even talking about them. I like South Africans. I don't mind where you're from, but I don't like the French too much. I've got a problem with the French. They're too arrogant. They're all like,
French, c'est amazing. Tu suis allé en Nouvelle-Zélande de Double-Valande.
Fuck that. It's too arrogant. How much more interesting would French people sound if they spoke French but with a really deep Maori accent? That would be fun. Imagine walking through Paris and two French guys pass you going, Tu suis allé en Nouvelle-Zélande de Double-Valande. Une, deux, trois, je m'appelle fucking Manu. Or an English accent, je suis allé Nouvelle de Beauvoir. In it, you twat. Un, deux, trois, je m'appelle Nigel. Le in it. The hardest one's Scottish. You can't speak French in Scottish. But I'll give it a crack.
But you can, you know, I used to do some stuff, and I had some mental health workers who came into my show and they went, you know, you touched on something, but you didn't go too far with it. By doing that, you're actually normalising it, which is a good thing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You know, if you bring up stuff that people can laugh at, and you're giving them food for thought or whatever as part of that gag, it's a lot different to then going, yeah, fuck those guys, or fuck that race, and I think that's. I mean, it's so screamingly obvious, but that is. I agree. That's what's really frustrating often in that kind of firing down of stuff. It's like, do you not think about the wider context? Can you not think about what stand-up's about? It's like someone a while ago when I was talking about Louis C.K. said they found him offensive. I'm like,
right.
You know, something blah 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 about how he talks about his daughters. I'm like, have you not listened? Have you not listened to what he's doing? He's actually telling beautiful stories about humanity. He's talking about how much he loves his daughters and so on.
So to answer your question, that is a great example.
Yeah,
you have to have a mentality of, that's going to happen. Yeah. My intent is good, but people are going to be offended.
Yeah.
So you have to actually belt through a lot of that, because some of that offence is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's malarkey.
Yeah.
But
also, it's, as I say, it's getting people to ponder the things they already ponder in a safe environment. And
I will totally take it on the chin in the past that I have some things that have said some things that have genuinely been offensive. Yeah. Those are things that I will take on board.
Hey, look, well, let's say how many thousands of hours of performance. If we did it as
we've done a few.
If we did it as a pie graph, we'd say, look, hey, there has to be.
Well, you can't not. I mean, I've made some mistakes, and we all do. And because it's live, it's not edited.
Yeah.
But what I found too about offensive, once people don't actually like you, I could do jokes from one of their favourite comics that they'd never heard, and they just wouldn't love them because they don't like me. And they'll say I'm really unfunny, but they could actually love the jokes. But once they switch off, they switch off. And they're very unforgiving. So even if I came back the year later, they'd be like, I hate him, I already hate him, and I'm going to hate him.
Oh, are you saying there's kind of a movement of people who found each other?
It's very small, but there are people out there who are not my fans.
Yeah.
I mean, and then, I have sold out shows. I obviously have a fan base.
Yeah.
And that's great. But there's obviously people who don't like what I talk about, or have heard things that they don't like. But I
think you just described anyone in the public eye.
Yes, well, that's right. But I don't have that same. I have to firstly meet someone before I ever criticise them.
Yeah,
great. I have to really meet them.
Yeah,
and secondly, I always give them. I always.
Then you go, yeah, I do hate that guy.
Yeah, that's right. But I'm also a big fan of forgiveness, and I'm also a big fan of realising that people change.
Yeah,
and giving them another opportunity. I think that's really important.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that some very. I think you're not being a particularly fair person if you just write somebody off for the rest of their life because you didn't enjoy a gig. Yeah, that's absurd.
Well, yeah, that's also you being closed-minded and...
well, there's a lot of that around.
And faction. Yeah, there is. And I think it speaks to a number of things we've kind of covered. Like, that way... I mean, I know people have always been like this, but I do think it's getting worse for the reasons outlined. It's an odd thing. Yeah, so... What is offensive? To me, I was thinking about it. It's probably, to me, offensive is... So, offensive to me would be doing said whatever it is, accent, take on this person, da-da-da-da-da, and then actually actively inciting an audience to hate.
Yes.
You know,
well,
who's the watermelon smasher? The American guy.
I know who you're talking about.
Okay, so that's an example.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you do that on stage, you're not really doing comedy for a start.
No, you're doing some sort of rally.
Yeah, a little bit. But I think if you have, first and foremost, if you have the intent to be funny, you immediately lose a lot of reasons why you can be found offensive.
Yeah.
But I would say, and I always kept this philosophy for years, but I've changed recently. I do think that if you normalise some things, there's things that can't be normalised.
Could you explain that, please?
Okay. I don't think you can normalise sexual assault. I don't think you can. I don't
But
think you should make that normal.
But can you tell a joke that involves rape that opens up a wider discussion of why
that's right.
people do that,
or
makes victims, they still feel comfortable, but I don't know.
Well, firstly, I can look at a gag and as a purist go, I can see why that's a great gag, but there's a part of me that goes, I can see why people might be offended by that.
Yeah.
I can understand that people might be. But you know what? If I was to say...
But then Louis C.K. does that,
totally.
that bit on actually quite graphic bit on molesting a kid.
Yeah, I know, that's
and
right.
still managed to turn into a thing where you go,
the odd thing about that is he's not talking about any individual kid, he's just talking about the act of it. But the way that he does it is, it's actually... incredibly walking the tightrope, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you were to have no judgment, that gag's fantastic. If you were to go, to be somehow affected by it, I imagine it would. I mean, I know a lot of people who wouldn't be triggered either way, even if they had.
This trigger thing. That's right. So I wasn't. Yeah, maybe there's that. Luckily, I got through childhood, as far as I know, without anything like that happening.
But then you could also have been in your childhood standing next to a dishwasher when your father-in-law belted you across the face, and then someone did a dishwasher gag on stage, and it triggered you about that particular experience.
I can't even watch the Fisher and Paykel lads.
Exactly. You can't even watch a Fisher and Paykel lads.
Yeah.
So that's going to trigger you.
Yeah.
So
someone picks up my laundry here every week.
So it's an enormous playing field, and if you decide not to do anything that might, then I'm not sure if you can call it comedy anymore. I'm not sure how it would work, and I think the audiences would drop off dramatically. But then I've seen incredibly left acts who are very good, politically left acts, like we had this brilliant English comic.
I'm a little closer.
Sorry, a brilliant English comic. Nish Kumar.
Rings a bell.
He was here last year. I mean, just terrific. I mean, had a lot of political ideas. I didn't agree with it all, but he was a good comic. And that's the way I look at comedy. I look at it without judgment. Just because I disagree with someone, it doesn't mean to say I'm going to dislike him or their comedy. Or her. And I thought he was terrific, and I pissed myself the whole way because he was just a really good comic.
Yeah,
but I certainly wasn't offended by anything. But I couldn't be because it was,
It's a career. It's a life of philosophy, man. It really is. It's it is. Assessing the human condition, assessing what society's doing now, assessing where you sit in the kind of zeitgeist.
Well, there's also the opposing side of it. As a comic, I can genuinely tell you, I've had experience of walking on stage, looking at a group of certain members of the audience, and just them not enjoying the fact that I'm a white man, and not often at all. Very, very, and especially if you're confident about something and you say something, because you're white and because of your gender, there's a lot of animosity towards you because they just don't see you as being in a position where you have the right to say it at all.
So who's booking you in Tūhoe?
Well, I'll try and give you an example here. I have literally said good evening on stage, and a member of the audience has gone, "Can you please stop mansplaining and telling me what kind of night it is?"
Okay, so this is a gender politics thing rather than
yes. And so I've said good evening, and someone has actually gone, "Can you stop telling me what kind of night it is? It might be a good night for you, but it may not be for me, and you should ask your audience members before you tell them what kind of night it is." I mean, that absurd.
Well,
and you're like, I haven't even started a joke here.
That's like so. That's so I don't know if dreary's the right word, that it can't even go into the heckle category.
That's because I looked, and constantly why I saw the number 44. They are looking to be offended. They're looking at every single thing that they can and pulling everything apart. They don't like the way that I stand. They'll find argument in the way that they? Well, I don't. Well, okay. Well, saying they. It's very hard to say because I certainly wouldn't say too many people over the age of 40, because it's a different generation. Sort of the grunge generation. We tended to have I don't think we were so much like that, but certainly a younger generation who've it can be millennials or postmodernism. Is that what I think they're described as at university?
Postmodernism.
Postmodern. I think that the postmodernists. Is that what it's described as?
But you mean an age group be millennials, wouldn't it?
Yes, but I think even postmodern... I could be getting this wrong, and that's fine. We can always edit it out unless you do the whole thing live, in which case I'm domed. I could be getting this wrong, and that's fine. We can always edit it out unless you do the whole thing live, in which case I'm domed. I could be getting this wrong, and that's fine. We can always edit it out unless you do the whole thing live, in which case I'm domed. I could be getting this wrong, and that's fine. We can always edit it out unless you do the whole thing live, in which case I'm domed. Well, I'm... As a 46-year-old guy, I find... The extreme left difficult to get my head around, probably because of my age, and also I
find the extreme right or left difficult to get my head around.
I'm going to agree with that as well.
So that go on.
I think the one thing you could possibly say about the extreme right, and I like to think of myself as a moderate, is that the extreme right is still into discourse.
Yeah.
They're still into having an argument and a debate. They're into freedom of speech, and they don't close down debate. They let speakers on campus. They listen to opposing thought. They're not offended by it. And I just think that freedom of speech is still really, really important to let you have your mind grow.
But then they also often believe that they've got a right to tell a woman to do what their body, like with abortion. They often also believe that male-female couples are the only couples. I see problems at the extreme of both ends, okay?
But I think that the right are very...
And I've spoken before on this podcast, and I spoke to you about it before. I'm even wary of that whole... coming back to the conflict thing and so on. I think all that feeds into... Go on.
I just think, well, I agree in those notions, but they have the right to think that, and they have the right to that, having that as being part of their 50% of the discourse in the argument. They don't deserve to be turned off and said, no, you can't speak, this is now banned. I see that as
but
outrageous.
Who's turning... No one's turning on the left more than they're turning on the right, are they? I think they're both extremes.
Well, for example,
I don't listen to either, to be honest.
I can't say that I'm the same there, but I was a little bit disappointed to hear that the ex-Muslim woman who wanted to come out to New Zealand decided not to because there were threats against her. And she was a woman who just had a story to tell, and they were seen as hate speech and anti-Islam, anti-Muslim. And I thought it was a shame because she had something to say from her personal experience.
And who stopped? Is this to do with the extreme left? They stopped that.
Well, yes, they did, and I'm not sure who was directly responsible. I have no idea. But I just, I'm not saying I'm outraged by it. I just think it's a shame. I think it's a real shame. I think everybody has the right, especially from a personal experience, to the right to voice their particular experience, especially if it's a true one. If it's being very honest. Yeah. And I think just to be in an environment where we're cutting people off from being able to do that is just a shame. It's disappointing.
Yeah, though I think that in the case of like I say, that woman who seemed so dreary that it didn't even fall into heckle category. It's just a bizarre line. Like, to me, that's just where the left, right, purple, pink, yellow, tall, short. That's just, to me, that there's a small percentage of humans that fall into categories.
That's right.
And she was of that small percentage that it feels like, to me, she's not very happy with something in her life.
Right.
And so I wonder why she was attending a comedy show that night. There's a strong case to be made that there's a wide range of entertainment in Auckland, and do you know what I mean? I don't know we can pin it on a whole category of people because you got someone who's not very happy.
Well, I mean, obviously the classic one, because that's where I was on. There's a bill, so there's other people they can like, and there's people and that's their choice, that's their right. But I mean, one thing that really freaked me out was the whole Max Key thing when he came out in the when he didn't come out. He
kind of did.
When the photos, hard to tell. But, and I had a lot of these women, a lot of my friends who I really like, giving them, really, really slating them on Facebook, saying, look at this guy, where does he think he is? I mean, essentially, he's a kid at the beginning of his journey in adulthood.
Yeah, he's that way. Keep going, sorry.
He's at the beginning of his journey in adulthood.
Bit of mic control, folks.
Well, and here's some, and here's some 40-year-old men or women, and women, giving this kid a hard time. I mean, I remember when I was 20, I think I was a little prat, but I would have been really disillusioned if a lot of 40-year-olds just went, "You're a prat, you haven't got a clue." Well, no, I didn't. But
you didn't go on the cover of Remix magazine in a Borat-style costume.
Well, I tell you what,
not being ironic.
20 years old, if they gave me 40 grand, I would have gone on a pair of Speedos. I would have done the whole business.
I don't think they gave him 40 grand. I'd say he probably gave them 40 grand.
Do you reckon? There could be there could be a good argument in that. But it's interesting now that people are able to have discourse about what we're talking about now, and I think in comedy, it's being done more and more.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's a lot of what we do have and has really changed the comedy scene. We have a lot more women doing comedy, and some of them are just fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, really good. And I'm of the belief that because there's so I don't even like saying female comic. I think you're funny, or you're just a comedian.
Yeah.
But
comedian.
Comedian. But it just happens that a lot of the really good young comics in Auckland at the moment happen to be women.
Good.
And I try to make my bills 50-50. I try and have 50% men, 50% women, not just because it makes me feel better, because it's just is better.
Well, this podcast is regrettably percentage-wise a sausage fest. I'm sort of trying to remedy that. Before I sort of segue to another topic, speaking of female comedians, and you spoke about Ursula, what's her surname?
Carlson.
That's right. Her rise to fame. What do you think she's got that's so appealing that she's sort of gone bang and captured those markets so quickly? Because I heard her say that, and I thought maybe she sort of talked it up a bit, that because I know how long often people take to craft their acts and stuff, and she said she went to an open mic night. Tell me if I've got this completely wrong.
Yeah.
And her colleague said, "Oh, you could do that," and then within a week or something, she'd whipped something up, and they headhunted her at the.
I said to her after her first gig, "You have to."
Was you? So you're actually a part of this story, yeah.
Well, it's just because she quoted me as saying this too in an interview she had. But when I first saw her, I'd not seen an act on their first ever gig go as well as she did with the maturity. I mean, firstly she wasn't in her 20s. She was a mature lady.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how old she is. I want to say that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
I'd say she'd be a bit older than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but she had something really special, and I just
not as old as you. Though.
And I am an oldie, but even after maybe 3 months, you looked at her and went, "There's something very special going on here."
Yeah.
The accent, the where she comes from, her background, her intellect, really dominates the stage. Very lovable, very lovable.
That accent is not an accent I associate with either a comedy or B, kind of timing. It just kind of gets spat at you often.
Yeah.
So what because I've only seen her on 7 Days, and she does a very particular thing there, and I know that, and I know they edit it, which is hugely different to the stand-up experience. Like, I should probably go and see her, Brendhan, but I'll just ask you instead.
That's right.
At some stage. What is she talking about? What is it like again? So I'm still asking the same question. Why does she appeal?
Firstly, she's a very heavy punchliner, so she's a really good gag writer. Very naturally funny lady.
Yeah.
Not totally different than offstage. That's you can always tell that a comic's going to be pretty good when they're pretty similar offstage.
Yeah.
She's just naturally very funny. Really good gag writer. Knows what she's doing very smartly. And also, she did something that really impressed me very quickly. And this is really mathematical about comedy, but it's very important. She let's say a band has their first album, and everyone goes, "Wow, what's the second album going to be like?"
Yeah.
When I saw her first hour, I went, "Now we're going to see what she's made of," because now she's got to come up with a second hour. And after that first hour, I just saw her going through so much material, and I was going, "Oh, has she lost form here? Is she not? She's not quite. Maybe she was just really good for a year, and now that she hasn't really got it in her." But what she was doing so much material, getting rid of all the crap, getting all the stuff that was good, tweaking it, and by the time she did her next hour, it was even better. So it was superb. Some could say
so it's like the music producer who ends up with 140 tracks and puts 12 on the album.
Sure.
Right.
Well, also, what she did do is, you want to get a lot of stuff out there and see what's working for you. Even stuff that probably was getting reasonably good laughs might not have got as big a laughs as she was getting with some of the other stuff, but she did it intelligently.
Yeah.
And you'd have to say, to an extent, common sense. She looked at all the material and just really methodically made everything better. And to do as well as she's doing, and for the amount of time she's been going, is remarkable. And so
3 years?
About 5.
5 years?
About
yeah.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's still, because she's a very funny woman. She's got a lot of natural ability. She's just very, very funny, and also the most lovely and kind lady.
So you mentioned there's something else I wanted to ask about as well. I'm really interested in the process because there's such a mix. There's the tales of Pam Stevenson saying that she and Billy were talking about something in the car, and then he got on stage, like 2 hours later, and did a 30-minute improvisation piece, da-da-da-da-da. So there's that. To me, that's kind of a unicorn, people that can do that. And then there's other people who talk about really crafting stuff,
right?
And everything's prepared and so on, and a bit of leeway and stuff. But what is the process? Because relating to Ursula, you talked about how she had to come up with a new hour.
Yeah.
Now I've listened to a lot of podcasts with stand-up comedians, and a lot of them talk about how. Well, I know it's famous. Louis does it each year. He has a new hour.
Right.
Now you're working every week. How does that work with you? Are you a come up with a new set guy, or a get on stage and do a bit of both? Or
I'm
because you are doing you're doing a show every week, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm doing probably 3.
But then is that what they call like the workshopping thing, where you do that and then you'll take your hour to the comedy festival?
I mean, once you finish the comedy fest, there's sort of no man's land for about 4 months, where you just use that material that's now really strong.
Yeah.
I always have, this is just my process, but January, February, March, sort of until now, I work on a whole load of material and do what Ursula did. Get rid of the muck, keep the stuff that's okay, make it better, make it good, make the stuff that's good into really, really strong stuff, and hone it, tweak it, which she does. And I'll be doing that it's just common sense, but you've got to do it. And mine is January, February, March. Some people might start writing immediately after the festival. That's not the way I work. Do
you have to tell the audience, like a lot of the dudes in the States do? Like apparently a lot of them go in, like Chris Rock will go into the Comedy Store and say, hey, I'm just workshopping some stuff tonight. Or
sometimes. Yeah. I mean, we have nights which are new material nights, which I run right up in Revelry every Wednesday night up in Possibly Road. It's really good. So that's a new material night. Yeah. Now, because it's April, I'm starting to do really large blocks of new material before the festival.
Yeah.
So I know that I can do a long time and not completely rely on gear that I've used for the last year. That has been very strong for me, because I have to do this hour show, and I'm not going to be able to use the old material.
Yeah.
So I have to get this at the equal of the confidence I need to deliver it. And only now in April am I starting to feel really good about it.
Yeah.
And I always try and time it around April, but I was freaking out about 2 weeks ago, but I've had about 5 gigs since where I've tweaked it enough that some of the stuff's coming to life. I have a picture in my head of where it's going, and I know I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. I saw the stuff I've seen of you, and also with comparing and so on. It's like a lot of I might not get the parlance right here, but kind of joke to joke based stuff. But then I've heard you talking about how you're getting more into that storytelling style. So where you're at now with that?
Well, storytelling's cool because you can do what you want with it.
Who do you think are the? So just cut you off. Who do you think are the? Who's naturally got that storytelling thing down globally as a comedian? Who do you just love to see tell stories?
Well, I used to really love watching Ewan Gilmore.
Yeah, right.
He told really beautiful stories.
Yeah.
He was really good, and before he died, I thought he was in the best form of his life. Mike King was Mike King's very good. Radar's a very good storyteller.
Yeah.
Some of the younger comics.
Yeah.
I would say if
overseas, obviously Billy, Louis.
Yeah, sure. And
yeah.
I mean, a lot of these younger comics, what they are doing. I do Australia quite a bit, and one thing I was really just love every time I go to Sydney is a big punchline, very punchline heavy.
Yeah.
So it's boom, boom, bang, boom, boom, bang.
Yeah.
And I like that because punchlines are hard.
Yeah.
They're the hardest thing about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who haven't done stand-up and who don't like stand-up because of the nature of it's narcissistic, you're on stage by yourself and the rewards are great. They're also very, can be very awful.
Yeah.
You can have some awful times. But that punchlining is harder, and when people don't punchline, to me it's lazy.
What do you mean don't punchline? How do you you've got to have punchlines to make people laugh, don't you?
You can be very entertaining and be very, very funny as a person and get a laugh the whole way through without actually having a punchline.
You're just
But
You're just an eccentric who managed to wander onto stage.
You know what? Why not? I mean, and at comedy festivals, I think because you've got an hour, you can be very engaging, you can be very likable.
Yeah.
But if you go up in a club and you're not full of punchlines of a relatively high level, and you go on in England or Australia up to some of the comics, you're dead. You're not going to survive because you're on with people who are they're essentially jokes within a storytelling kind of a way of doing it, but they're written as a for example, and when I did that joke about the herpes curing cancer, it's irrelevant whether or not you like the joke. Some people are going to hate that, but what it is, for people who do like it, and normally I do that at a late show, by the way. It's not something I'm going to open with on a bloody Tuesday night in a comedy festival at 7:15. That's a late show.
I thought you would have told it on that cafe show after the breakfast show on TV.
They edited it out.
Yeah.
But what it is, it's a premise and then a punchline, and that's why I like it. And there are some comedians who when they start with a premise and then they'll just do a series of punchlines, and I love watching them.
Hedberg.
I like very much Hedberg.
Yeah.
Very much Hedberg. I mean, he's just a punchliner.
Yeah.
You know, and
he was like kind of free jazz of punchlines, which is kind of
and really funny jokes, you know. And if you had to get your...
I brought an ant farm. Those fellas didn't grow shit. There's so many of them.
I used to take drugs. I still take drugs.
Yeah.
I used to too. Just some beautiful lines.
I like the FedEx guy because he's a drug dealer and he doesn't even know it.
That's right. I mean, amazing aim. There's actually a couple of really good one-line comics.
Quickly with that now, because we met twice before, and apparently the first time I terrorised you, but I thought at the same time we were just extraordinarily drunk. Both suddenly... I seem to remember standing up on tables at the Matterhorn and entertaining the place for a few minutes. And whoever it was with you, I don't know if it was your manager, your chaperone or whatever, came up to me straight afterwards and said, "You've got natural comic timing. Have you ever thought about being a stand-up?" Now, is there such a thing? And what I'm meaning there is it something, because like being a savant musician or a really gifted writer, do you think it's something innate people have to have on top of all the work, or can you do that 10,000 hours? And because I think some people just never have timing.
I'll start by saying Ewan Gilmore and I were there. That was Ewan Gilmore.
Oh, was that Ewan Gilmore?
Ewan Gilmore was there.
And 25 years ago.
You weren't actually being mean. You were saying something quite personal, and I kind of dug it. And then we had a good chat afterwards.
And then 15 years later, I saw you in a bar and said, "Hey, do you remember me?"
And I went, "I do, buddy." And then I got triggered.
Triggered
by just for having met you.
Right.
But you were fine. You were fine, and it was a great night.
It was.
There are people who... there's no way I could have carried on doing stand-up if I just wasn't being lucrative at it, you know.
Yeah.
And I've read on Twitter and I've read on things going, Brendhan Lovegrove, you know, people who don't like me, people who don't like me will say he's not funny. But...
You've got timing. I watched some more stuff today. Just to make sure I wanted to have you over.
I've been invited to so many countries around the world, headlined in England at some of the top comedy clubs. If they're saying I'm not funny, it's just stupid. It's like saying, you know, they don't like what I'm doing. I think is what they're saying, and that's fine, and I'll take it. And it feels upsetting because I'm only trying to make people laugh. But in terms of becoming good at it or anything like that, I think that there is an innate something about someone that makes them particularly funny.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's an art form that you can develop over a period of time to have a very good routine, solid routine, sort of 40 minutes. Ideally, the really good comics would probably want to think they could write about 40 minutes to an hour of really good stuff every year. But to constantly come back and make audiences laugh and be at the top of
you got to have something. You got to have timing. You got to have something that works.
And you've got to have an understanding of your level of what is funny and what isn't.
Yeah.
You know, because some people, I find, and this isn't a criticism against any individuals, but individuals who might be like this.
Yeah.
And I can't think any offhand, but if I'm watching a comedian, I don't mind if they're doing the same jokes.
Yeah.
As long as they're really funny.
Yeah.
And anyone who's continuing to do the same joke that they had 5 years ago, if it's really funny, I can understand why it's in there. But I can't understand people who are getting on stage and okay with going okay, and doing the same joke for 5 years ago that was okay then, it's okay now.
Well, to me, that's like what I sort of joked about before. I always call it it's like when you go and see a band reforms, right? And it's been 40 years or whatever, and all these people dump all this money to go and see them, and they plod through Yeah. To me, it's that for whatever reason it happens. It's that Vegas cabaret approach to entertainment.
You're right.
You know, it's like, I know I can pack seats.
Yeah.
I'll just... So, with back to the other point we're sort of making with that, like, You know, sometimes I've just encountered people who I feel just picked the wrong thing. It's like, why did you choose... Wait, just let me finish. Why did you choose to be a musician, man? Like, it's like, I'm 20 years later, I see you again, you're still kind of, you know, are there... And obviously, no names, but... There are people who are still doing it. You just go. Why haven't you stopped?
I hear you. I think that the scene in New Zealand is actually so small and cosy that some people probably just like doing stand up. Yeah. But what I would say, I've seen some people go for 5 years that I genuinely thought they're never going to find this, and they've just found it. They just got it.
Right. So that speaks to what I said before. You can
absolutely.
Right. So there's no answer.
And out of respect, I won't mention names, but I'll tell you one person who actually was very funny beforehand. Then he just took a year off.
Can we play Warm Cold? No, just kidding.
No, I'll come out.
Is he tall? Is he short?
Is his name Pax Asadi? Pax is a huge thing for me because the 3 years before he sort of took a year off, he was good. He was really good. He was off and on, hot and cold, but he came back after a year, and he is just he's so good at the moment. Pax Asadi, that's actually how you pronounce it. He's Pakistani Iranian.
Is he the dude hosting George Brecky now?
I'm not sure if he's still doing it now. I think he could be, but he's become a terrific comic. You know, and people like Melanie Bracewell, who's on, I think she's on Hauraki in the mornings. Yeah. You know, she could leaps and bounds. Just people who've got it, but she's a very natural performer, really good at it. And some really exciting acts. And I feel bad not naming names. I wanted
to ask you before we kind of zoomed past it. Sign of a good podcast, by the way. I get up to 5 questions and I forget them all, and we've got to reset. But you quite a while ago you said that you'd been someone who's done something like stuck to just stand up, and I can totally see why in New Zealand or anywhere, in fact, that you would naturally end up doing something like a breakfast radio show or song, because it's the same sort of skills. Why haven't you kind of done the gun for a permanent spot on 7 days, or is it just that you like being out on stage doing stand-up?
Well, firstly, I've done things like A Night at the Classic.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was in 2 seasons of that, and I've done a bit of acting, just did a film in Wellington. So I have branched out and done some other things.
Yeah, I'm not saying you haven't.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
But of late, but in those early years, to be fair to the guys on 7 days, they chose the right panel for that. They're fantastic. I do 7 days, not as much as some others. I'm not as good in collectives as some other.
But you specifically said before, it's the only reason I asked this, that you had chosen not to go that way.
I'd like to be doing more 7 days, but I think that, and I was on more.
There's the call.
No, I was on Solo Gold FM.
You
for
were
about
a
month, and they went, look, this isn't working out. And I was with Kevin Black, and the late Kevin Black, and I went, but I didn't enjoy radio.
No.
I didn't enjoy it. And the stand-up thing's been... And also, I was travelling a lot overseas for a period of time where I just couldn't do anything else. So, I spent 6 years in London. I do a lot of Asia, do a lot of Australia, and other bits and pieces.
Also, coming back to another thing that I wanted to touch on, again, small community. You talked about the man being really gifted and stuff. Talk a little bit about Ewan passing. That must have been a freaky... Was it expected or
no, not at all. The only way to describe that, it was there's nothing good about. There was just nothing good about that happening. I mean, the whole industry went into a depression. He'd just done a gig the night before and smashed it on After Hours. You know, a typical Ewan set, got on stage, blew everybody's mind, and then bloody died when he got home that night. And I don't know enough about the actual. And how it happened and so forth, but just that he passed in his sleep, and I woke up and heard about it early in the morning, and like everybody else was just I just couldn't believe it, and an enormous loss, and a hugely loved guy, and not just in the comedy industry in which he was, he was responsible for a lot of bringing a lot of audience to comedy. But the whole of New Zealand, he was loved,
That's right, and it was reflected even people who weren't stand-up comedy people. It was like it was a loss. So, and you were saying in terms of where he was at with his material and so on, and his stagecraft and stuff, you think he would have ended up in the kind of Billy T canons. I don't mean the award, I mean the being remembered as such.
I think that when I turned on the news that night, he was on both channels for the first 10 minutes of both networks. Yeah. I think he'll always be remembered for exactly what he was, for being a monumental part of New Zealand comedy, as was Billy T and with what he did, and as was the late who's just died.
So another one,
John
just
Clark.
taken really early.
Well, that's right.
Because when I was a kid, I didn't really compute how young Billy T was taken until I'm like, shit, I'm nearly that age now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't want to freak you out, Lewis, but I'm going to die. You're going to die.
Yeah. It's actually, you know what? It's actually started to become an existential crisis since I turned 40, which is only a few months ago. I've started to think about the fact that I'm...
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we just talk about death for the next 20 minutes?
We could still have another 35 years. Who knows? I mean...
What do you mean we could?
We're going to. But he died very young. He died very young, and I no one would like to go at that age. But
how old was Ewan?
51.
Wow.
So hugely missed, massive loss.
Yeah.
Knowing that he'll never walk in and stand on stage at the Classic or anywhere is there's not many days where I don't think about Ewan Gilmore, as well as a lot of other comedians.
In terms of people coming together and afterwards and so on, and don't get the word I'm going to choose here wrong. Was it a good funeral? Was it a
it was outrageous. It was like, because it was MC'd, if that's what you like to MC'd, hosted by.
Yeah, there was some good material. I'm sure Ewan would not mind joking about
one of his best friends, Hilary McMillan, who was also Hilary Coe.
Yeah.
Sorry, and she was his manager. And when he came in, we all gave him a standing ovation and cheered.
Yeah.
And because it was please welcome Ewan Gilmore,
Yeah.
And then one of his best friends, Vaughan King, got on and did a joke that Ewan promised he'd do if he ever died. And oh boy.
What? Hang on. So he did the joke that Ewan promised he'd do?
Ewan said, if ever I die, you've got to say this joke at my funeral.
Oh man, that's full on.
And what a joke. It was like...
Oh.
I think he'd be okay with me telling it to you because he wanted it told, but...
I wasn't going to ask, but...
the joke was, knock, knock.
Who's there?
Well, clearly not Ewan. That was what he said at his funeral.
See, and that's nice because I could see how that would take this... It makes everyone in the room go...
It did.
It's like, what do you call it? The pressure valve.
And it also gave that real understanding of what Ewan was all about, what his humour was all about. And people pissed themselves. There were a lot of tears and there were a lot of laughter during that particular in that funeral.
Yeah. So another segue, another topic dear to stand-up comedy aficionados as well as practitioners, hecklers.
Right.
Are they a bunch of... are they a bunch of trouble, or have you utilised them in your set?
90% of the time, hecklers are... if you've been doing a lot... I mean, I try to improvise around hecklers all the time. I really enjoy...
Was the wider topic, let's talk about this nation's attitude to alcohol, or...?
Well, I think that the level of heckling in New Zealand is minimal.
We're quite a... That's right, we're sort of very...
In England, I got some bloody beauty.
Sure, Aussie you would as well, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, but the Aussies are great when you're in
Hey,
a
you
Kiwi
bloody sheep shagger!
There's a little bit of that. And, but I'm already ready for some of the stuff they've got to say.
Yeah.
But what I like about performing in Australia is they dig us.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, g'day, Australia. You're a Kiwi guy. Go on, be funny. Oh, yes, funny. Good on you. Way to go. Don't give a shit.
I just thought before the heckler thing, that must be a terrible line. It's like, oh, you're a comedian, say something funny.
Yeah, well, you get that all the time.
Yeah.
And that, and you're always going to get it, I suppose. But I don't mind people saying that. They can view it however they like.
But with the heckling thing, I mean, more to me, the reason I ask is...
I can understand why people do it.
Well, I can understand why people do it.
Yeah.
They're out having a good time. They want to be part of the experience. Perhaps they are a little aspirational. But
they can get a big laugh.
But good on them. If they pull it off, then great. They've got into the rhythm. But the rhythm. You guys spending all this time crafting this thing. The counter argument is, why is this schmo come in? And, you're effectively on a thing that's got rhythm and time. And if they kind of break that, I can imagine it would make some people kind of derail off their...
Yes, it can.
Yeah.
And I've heard some really, some shocking comebacks. But I actually spend a lot... I spend a lot of time in my early days writing comebacks. And I still every now and again will write some new ones too. And sometimes they're hack, but they're just funny. They're cool.
Yeah.
And
who was it? One of this? Why are you hassling me? Why I do my job? I don't come and kick the cock out of your mouth while you're working.
I think that's probably sounds like a Bill Hicksy kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I about 2 years ago, I remember saying to someone, because he was piping up about, I said, you're an audience is very much like a face, and you are a zit. And you need to be popped, and then the healing can begin.
Did that just come out?
Yeah, and I use that quite a bit now. There's other bits and pieces I use, some ones that have always worked. But sometimes I just like talking to them because there's a lot of humour in the crowd. And I had for example, the other day I burst and I was singing in a Les Miserables kind of way. That's because my brother was from the arts, and sometimes I get bored with talking, so I just started singing instead of talking. And then I spoke to a young American woman, and we were talking about boys, and then I sung to her, "Have you found any New Zealand boys? In fact, have you done it with a New Zealand guy?" Or I think I might have even said, "Have you found New Zealand dick?" or something like that. And she just stood up and went, "Yes!" And it was just great in a very sort of soprano kind of. Yes, I have. And she was an American woman, and it was so funny.
Yeah,
because it was like Marius singing to Eponine and Les Miserables. Oh, Marius,
you're up on a balcony.
That's right. Yeah, and I was up on stage, and she just went, "Yes!" And it was just this beautiful moment.
3 tables down, it was and someone else was like, "That was me."
And not a very happy-looking American fella behind her when she came out and said that. But I don't think it was her boyfriend. But it was just this beautifully timed. She got into it, she dug it, and sang it back. It was cool. It was just really, really cool. The audience enjoyed it.
When you've gone overseas to timing. And heckling and stagecraft and so on, are there... Because I saw you've done... It was a very generic Asia, so I don't know which countries you've done, because that presents a lot of different cultures. So you've done through Asia, you've done Australia, you've done the UK. Is that everywhere?
I have done the United States.
Okay, so let's go those areas. Do you quickly realise there are major tweaks to be made... show-wise, or is there a universal language, or is it somewhere in between?
Well, the universal language is funny, and that's the first thing you learn. What is you're hearing laughs, and you're in Cambodia or Vietnam or Jakarta and Malaysia and Singapore, and I love playing Asia because I used to live in Hong Kong for a while. I can speak a little bit of Cantonese, but I love the Asian culture. My stepmother's Asian, and some of the comedians coming out of Asia at the moment. Very, very funny.
Have you seen the Chinese guy that's made it in the States? I know that sounds like
Ronnie
one
Chang.
Chinese guy in the States. I watched
Chang.
I watched him at the
Malaysian
president. What do they call that? The press dinner or whatever they call it.
Is it Ronnie Chang, the little
I've
Malaysian guy?
got to send you the link later on. It's so good. Yeah. Anyway,
right.
Back to the cultural thing. The universal language is funny.
Obviously, you've got to get your material. What you can't go to bloody.
I was in Ekatahuna last night.
Bloody Brian Tamaki, what's going on there? Who's that? But what I would say is especially when I went to England, one thing I was really interested in was the fact that some gear that worked beautifully here didn't resonate with the English.
Which is funny because you think that you think of everywhere they'd be our closest kind of cultural...
Well, yes, but also they are so comedy literate over there because they've had bloody 100 years of it.
Yeah.
There were other gags that that I thought were good that never really kicked it over here that kicked in England.
Wow.
And Britain.
So you realise the gear you thought was mid-shelf was top shelf, and the gear you thought was top shelf was...
Yeah, but by that stage I was only going for the magnitude of the laugh. But over there it was there was actually there's a quality, something's more better than something else. And I think the standard, obviously, when I first went over there was much higher than I'd experienced. And so I had to do much more clever type of comedy. I had to do much more word play. I'm not just bloody on from New Zealand, here's something about the haka. I actually have to make a joke about I was on one of my first gigs I ever used in England was, I've come over here, you've got an ad on the TV at the moment going, chopping boards are less hygienic than toilet seats. And that was an
laughing
ad.
Already. Okay.
And there was an ad saying chopping boards, it was so you could buy some house products to make your stuff more hygienic. So I said to them, I've only been here a month and I've been around a couple of bars and I stole their toilet seats and I took them home and chopped my food up on those, and I feel a lot more healthier, though I've developed a really intense cocaine addiction. And they all got it because you could go to any bar in England, get a credit card, put it on top of a toilet seat, and then you'll get a line of cocaine by the end of the night because so much coke. But they went, that's good gag, son. He's just arrived. He knows what we like. A lot of cocaine in the toilets. This geezer's all right. But in New Zealand, they go, oh, why would you get high off a toilet seat?
Oh, really?
What was the credit carding?
Well, the reason you wouldn't in New Zealand is because that would be it'd be $2,800 worth of cocaine scraped up.
Well, you wouldn't leave in it if it's that sort of money. You're not going to leave any on a toilet bob. It's £50 over there.
No.
But
and by the way, I don't think people generally chop lines on toilet seats. You'll find it's generally the
Well,
I've just ruined your joke there.
I know what you're saying.
Okay.
I know. So, well, the top of the toilet seat when you put the seat down on the not the actual seat, but
Toilet lid.
Toilet lid.
Yeah. Hey,
Fine.
but
They got it.
the
They
information-
got it. I think at first you laugh at it, and I bet there's people in the crowd going, I think he means the lid. Do you think he means the lid?
Yeah, yes, dear. They
'Cause you can't
mustn't. They mustn't have lids in New Zealand.
But do you think the
The
partner who
seats.
says that goes, I don't think it matters, you fucking idiot. The point is...
Oh, I think that's being pitched at me.
Sorry. I didn't mean it, but I guess you see my point.
So how does great joke. So how does it work when, like, the band that leaves New Zealand, goes to try and do Australia and then the UK? Well, in that world, very few break through in the UK. How does one Brendhan Lovegrove get shows when they first
That's
arrive
a really interesting
in the
question.
United Kingdom?
That's a really interesting
Yeah.
question. There is a huge difference, and here it is. If I was an actor and I was a famous, really good actress or actor from New Zealand and I went to England, I'd probably have to start from scratch unless I had gone over there for some particular work that I got beforehand. But a lot of, it would be hard.
Yeah.
If I was in a band, I'd have to go from scratch and start from scratch, and
Yeah.
that would be hard.
Yeah.
Some of them do it. Really good bands, really good actors, really talented people. Some have made in Hollywood, but a lot have tried. The one different thing about comedy is that if you're good, you can get straight into the big clubs in England straight away.
How?
You do one gig, or you come over with a reputation from other comics who've been here for comedy festivals.
But
You
that's weird. That sounds like that should work in any other creative scene. Is there something about the scene that...
Well, firstly, they want new acts. They
Yeah.
like overseas acts, and you're good enough.
So
And-
you didn't even start off doing like some pub in London,
Oh, no,
like open mic night with
well,
7 people?
No, when I first arrived in England, I had a few gigs set up at some really good clubs.
Yeah.
But I hadn't at that stage. I never really got on. I did some gigs at the Store, which is a good club, but I didn't do many at the Store. I don't think I did quite my best work there. I got on a chain called Jongleurs, which had about 25 clubs, and I was closing for them fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I would up the creek in Greenwich and Croydon, and the Glee Club in Wales and Birmingham.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of that, a lot of the Stand in Scotland, which are great clubs, very established clubs, but I was straight into those. In my first sort of 3 months, I was doing bits and pieces, but I had some great clubs to go into and be seen immediately
Yeah.
because my booker immediately got me some good rooms.
Yeah.
So comedy's very different in that regard. You can go straight into some of the top,
that's
top
cool.
clubs. If somebody like... I'm not sure how much Di Henwood has done in London, but if he was to go there now, his reputation here would I mean, he's fantastic. I love Di to bits.
Yeah.
He would get straight into
I had him on
rooms.
here.
Right.
Yeah, he had some very funny tales of, I think, a fringe show he did for Edinburgh before he... had
Right,
notoriety.
so, yeah.
I think that he said there was literally, 2 people in the audience, and partway through, one of them goes, "Hey, is your mum da-da-da-da-da?" And it turned out it was the whole story
right.
of... that would actually... But having said that was before he'd got chops here, so you're right. Yeah,
Right.
if he'd already had that career going...
Well, I had a gig in Edinburgh where there was one person in the crowd, and halfway through the gig...
So it does, it's a thing.
They
right.
went to the toilet. What do I do? Do you carry on? Do you...
Surely there's a what's that word?
I don't know
What's
if they
that,
went to the
what's that
toilet, they actually
word
didn't come
I
back.
learnt in 5th form English when we did a lesson on meetings. There's a
Right.
word for a minimum amount of people. A quorum, a quora. Surely there's a quorum for a show. Like
Well,
one...
Raider and I did. We did okay for the first sort of 2 weeks. Had a bit of a tough time in the third. It's been so long since I've done Edinburgh anyway.
Any other
It's
sort
really
of tales of hilariously bad shows that were out of your control?
Well, there was one actually that Rhys Darby and I... Rhys, when he was in England, came to visit me when I was doing Battersea, which is part of in London.
Yeah.
And I was having a particularly hard time with this front row guy. Who was giving me the finger in a tracksuit. Now I saw he was his brother, and I'm talking like...
Did he have a shank showing?
He's one of these little dudes, right? Look, what are you keep
Had his
looking at, you wanker?
had his hair like
just
combed
like,
down, full
totally.
Reebok tracksuit.
Totally.
Yeah.
And he was with his brother and I think family. And then I just got off stage and I said to Stephen K. Amos, who's been out here quite a few times, check out the guy in the front row, ignore him. And because he's going to give you a bit of shit. And he was, he's just doing the finger at me the whole time,
Yeah.
which is pretty off-putting. There's like 400 people in the
Yeah.
crowd. I just didn't mention it.
Too much coke off the toilet lid.
Oh, it's probably a
Sorry,
bit of that.
seat. Sorry, seat.
So Amos comes on. He's on for about 10 minutes. And then he just stops and goes, "Mate, could you not do the finger at me anymore? It's really rude. And I'm trying to do a gig here and I don't like your animosity." And I think he called him a racial slur, which I can't remember what it was, but it was definitely racial.
Yeah.
And Amos went, if you and I were outside right now, I feel like taking you outside and smacking you in the face. I'm not putting up with that.
Yeah.
Can the security please remove this gentleman?
Dark.
And they came and got him.
Yeah.
He took a swing at the guy took a swing at the security, missed. So the security punched him. The brother got up, threw a glass at security, missed, hit the table next to them. They picked up their glasses, threw it at their table, missed, hit the table beyond that one. And within 10 seconds, it went from an all-in... the mother, the father, the two sons, tables, chairs, and point-blank bottles and jugs just being thrown, and I'm talking, 50 to 100 at point-blank range.
Yeah.
And Stephen came us on stage going, "Stop it!" And it was just... And so me and, obviously, Reese and I sort of crawled under a table at the back. But we were just looking...
I just imagine Reese peering out from the bottom.
Well, it just spun out of control, and we're talking a place where people take their mum and dad, and it was violent.
Yeah.
And then, but the reason I'll never forget it is...
But it sounds like the sort of place a certain demographic take their mum and dad.
Yeah, sure.
If mum got in there with the WWF wrestling chair and...
Well,
because with this guy, it sounds like to me that would be bad yet expected behaviour for a 15-year-old who's angry.
Well,
I hope he wasn't 30.
To be having spent a lot of time in England, I saw a lot of pretty some pretty aggressive sort of behaviour.
Yeah.
But Lewis, the thing about that night that I'll never forget was after the MC came on, and I won't say his name. He's a fabulous guy, really funny guy.
Yeah.
And he tried 2 jokes, and we'd just seen people being ambulanced out.
Oh my God, they kept the show going.
And he did. Well, he was the last act, but then all he had to do was go, "Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen," but he did 2 jokes, and they died. They were really flat. And he came off, and I went, "Why did you do 2 jokes?" And this is what he said. He said, "Brendan, here's the thing. All my life, I've always wanted to know how my comedy would go in a very bad situation. And what I learned tonight is that in a very bad situation, my comedy goes very badly." And I was in hysterics. But that's why I miss England. I miss that scene. I miss the way that they thought about it.
Yeah.
I miss how good they were. I miss the camaraderie, and
I do. You're right. You just summed up what I like. Particularly, it sounds like a Londoner. Yeah, that's right. That sort of attitude to everyday life. The crew. I want to talk to you. We're nearly there, actually. One other thing I read is that you've done cruise ships, and I sort of pictured I sort of remember that guy in the what's that style? I can't think of the style, but the entertainer on Heidi High.
Right, yeah.
Does it feel like you're going into that territory, or are cruise ships?
No, firstly, it's the I'm doing it.
You know who I mean? Right?
I do.
Picture, Ted. I don't even remember his name.
What's
Tartan?
That?
Tartan.
What sort of shirt is that you're wearing? That looks like a curtain. Isn't that funny? Everyone clap. Yeah, it's funny. It does look like a curtain, that sort of thing. Not really, no. I've got a wife. She's so fat. How fat is she? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No, not at all. No, this is a particular cruise line of that. And also, I'm doing the late show, so it's an adult show. It starts at 11:15. Sort of knocks out the 60-plussers, but some of them come. And they're Australian and New Zealand's are very sort of, sort of middle-classy kind of good fun people. And you only do sometimes one show or maybe 2, one for a crowd going or coming back from somewhere, and then another crowd going to get on the boat and go somewhere. So you can do the same sort of 45. I'm going to do about an hour. You do it in the theatre, which gets up to sort of 700 people, and it can be great gigs. They can be really good.
Do you live on that thing for months when you do it?
No, because I try not to do it too often. I haven't done one for about.
So you just
5
do
months.
what you do one, and you go out. Because I think more what I'm speaking to is the person who would end up on the boat and every night come out and go, "Hey."
No. Well, it's because you get recognised on the boat. So if you
is kind of that Vegas cabaret thing again.
Yeah, if everyone knows 7 days. So if you have the New Zealand crowd, you tend to get inundated with a lot of good. Join us for a drink, and I tend not to. But I'll get back on cruise ships because my big thing is I love stopping off on some of the islands. Yeah. You get to walk around these beautiful islands for the day.
It's amazing.
And I just put the sneakers on and go for a bloody big trip.
I wasn't knocking it. I was just interested in the experience.
Sure.
Because cruise ships are a particular entertainment package.
Sure, and I think I love what they do with the comedy because I know the other comics who do it, and they're great. A lot of Australians.
Yeah.
And the show is really fun.
Yeah.
But when you're in your cabin and you don't know anyone on the boat, you can get a bit lonely. And good place to write or read.
Yeah. Good. Hey man, well this is.
Can I say something before? Just to anyone listening.
It's not the toilet lid thing again. Let it go.
No.
No. Tell us about your show as well.
Odd. Well, just that's in this Mortal Coil. I like the show. I think it's going to be fun. But the only thing
I'm glad that if someone's going to endorse it, it's you, because
yeah. But whenever I do anything that might go out on social media or anything, I'd just like to say that if anyone's listening who in any way hasn't liked what I said, I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong about it. This is how I feel now. Doesn't mean to say anything that I've said is necessarily how I'm going to feel in time. I'm happy to be proven wrong or told I'm wrong and have that discourse. In fact, I promote that kind of discourse. And
hey, well, welcome to podcasting, man. It's exactly why I started, because I'm sick of 20-second snippets of wider, deeper, honest conversations.
Yeah, right.
So
I truly feel from an older comics perspective, with the amount of people who get upset by things, and the majority don't. Yeah. I just don't want to upset people.
Yeah.
I really, really don't. That is not my intent. Got to remember, all I ever hear when I'm doing a gig is laughter. Yeah. To be honest, and and sometimes you're killing, and then you get a tweet and you go, oh, "Jesus, someone just said he's disgusting."
Well, what you got to definitely got to not stop is doing your material the way you want to do it. You've got to challenge people. It's the stand-up job.
That's right.
You're the mouthpiece. We're going to keep going for another 10 minutes. No, that's right. We'll finish here.
Okay,
thanks for coming in, Brendhan.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.